I know this is about a different planning, but I'm not very familiar with these, so I thought I would come up to memory myself and become a little bit more educated. I was wondering when.
Come up to the mic, would you?
Yes.
Tell us your name.
And I just had a question about the potential annexation and rezoning of plot number 02-117-022. I could not see it on the schedule as on your upcoming list, so I just was trying to get a little more information and familiarize myself with the process.
Okay, so, and this is the property at the end of Garden Drive, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Right now, it won't go before the Planning Commission yet.
Okay.
It needs to go to the City Council first.
Okay.
And they will, Scarlett is going to correct me.
I'm glad you're here because I knew that you were the one to talk to.
The petition failed to certify. The sponsor and the property owner were notified, and they did not submit any corrections to their petition. So a notice has been sent out to them stating that the petition was rejected because it was deficient in some items. They will have to reapply. So right now it is not an active annexation petition.
Okay. I'm not the one that petitioned originally, so if I were to re-petition or connect with the person who did, that's something I would do with you, Scarlett?
Okay, now when you're talking petition, are you talking about? I know there is a Facebook petition being circulated. Are you talking about that petition, or are you talking about actually petitioning to annex the property?
I guess both. Help familiarize me and educate me a little bit.
Do you represent the landowner?
I do not.
Then you won't file the
I wouldn't
petition.
I wouldn't be petitioning to annex or rezone because I don't represent the landowner.
That's the petition she's talking about.
Okay,
Is the petition by the landowner for annexation or a representative of the landowner? So you wouldn't.
Yes.
So you wouldn't be one of those petitioners.
Right. Okay. So their annexation failed because of a lack of information, and they have yet to refile with you.
Yes, they were missing a required signature,
Okay.
and they did not get that required signature in. And so we've sent them their notice of rejection.
And how long? I mean, can they petition multiple times? Do they have a time limit?
They can petition again, yes,
Yeah.
and then it will start over like a new annexation.
Okay.
So
Okay. So right now it's kind of on hold.
actually, it's not on hold. We will not act on anything unless they file a petition.
Right.
Now they can use some of the same documentation
Right.
that they had, and then just give us the initial document with the signature that we needed. But as far as Providence City is right now, that annexation is done.
Okay. And it's right now just in Millville City's jurisdiction.
It's in the county. It's not in Millville. It's county land. That's why it could be an annexation. Nope.
No, it's actually in the unincorporated portion of Cache County. It's privately owned,
Right.
but it is in the unincorporated portion of Cache County.
Is it possible for me to know who the owner of that land is?
David Matthews, that's a matter of public record. So yes, I can tell you that.
Thank you. Okay.
If you go to the county map section,
Okay.
and pull that up, just look at the map and find it on there, and you'll.
If you want to call me tomorrow, I can walk you through the steps to get to that map.
Okay, that would be very helpful. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate the information. Is there any other additional information that you might give someone like me who is new to this process?
You're welcome to contact staff, and we'd be happy to walk you through any information you'd have.
Thank you. I won't take any more of your time here, but I appreciate.
Now we can ask you questions.
Well, you sure.
What are your concerns as a resident?
As a resident, my concern is the land isn't necessarily congruent with the adjacent land and the way that the land has been used. It is kind of unique in that it butts up to the west against Utah State's agricultural research land. And so that will, probably for ever remain in their jurisdiction and agricultural land, which kind of landlocks that plot and makes traffic really funneled through almost a mile of single family residential housing.
Garden Drive.
Yeah, Garden Drive, and that just makes obvious concerns. I feel that the roads aren't really adequate, and the area isn't really adequate to support large mixed use housing or commercial land. The other zoning, as I was looking at the maps yesterday and today, it looks like everything around that is the single family housing, and it varies in different degrees of how much land, per unit is allocated there. I'm sure you're very aware of that.
Did you look at Millville zoning or just
I
Providence's?
was looking at Providence zoning.
Okay, you probably ought to look at Millville zoning as well,
Yeah, I did
because
notice
it isn't the same.
it's not the same. Okay, thank you. I did know that it's kind of funny back there that it kind of has the Utah state land and then the Providence city land, like a little jot of Millville that's been annexed. A couple of developments, one that's Providence and one that's Millville, depending on how they're doing it. So there are homes that are being built right now. Most of those homes that are going up right now are on a third acre or more, and then the ones that are just higher that I know are being they must have passed through Millville because they have sold the lots already, and they're all over an acre, and that's just within, I don't know, 200 yards of that land. So that it's a concern there.
Stay on top of it. Make sure you come back to the public sessions, and
Yeah.
we're very interested in what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time. Like I said, I'm new to this process, but I appreciate your time on what you do and helping to educate me. So thank you.
The other thing that you might consider as you look at the Millville
Yeah,
map, if it's not annexed, then we have no say.
right,
So,
Right.
and Millville can do whatever they want.
right. Absolutely, they
So-
can. I have a couple of friends who are residents just across the border
Yeah.
who are right there, and I that's one of the reasons why I thought it was Millville land already and being annexed into Providence is because they've had some of the same concerns on their end, and I think that they've reached out to their civic government, but I need to find those details. That's just kind of word of mouth. So thank
Great.
you. I appreciate it.
Love that you're here and that you're involved in the process.
Well, I'm trying to be more educated. I feel like
It's
But-
complicated.
it is complicated, and I can read a lot, but I feel like seeing faces and becoming more educated would be important. So thank you.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks for coming. Okay, anyone, you didn't find anything?
No.
That anybody sent in? Okay, so we will close the public comment at this point. We have no public hearings or legislative action or administrative action, but we do have some training.
Before you start on the training, this isn't on the agenda, but can I take just a few minutes and introduce Ty
Yes, please do.
to,
He's a new face.
he is a new face. And so as you all know, my position has had a lot of hats. And we're working diligently to reduce the number of hats. So the hat that I'm keeping is the land use community development type hat. And Tyler has taken, Tyler has taken the city recorder hat. So Tyler is our new city recorder, and he will be responsible to work with you, Kathleen, on agendas and stuff. I'm still doing land use, so I will work with you on those as well. And we'll work with Tyler to make sure that information is distributed and out to everybody. But Tyler is going to be sitting in this place doing the recorder duties from now on. So we welcome Tyler, and you want to take just a teeny minute and talk about yourself for a second?
If I have to, I can.
And do better than me and talk in the
Have
mic.
him stand up here. We can see him better.
Okay.
So I am Ty Cameron, for my third day here. Before here, I worked for the Ogden District Court as a case manager. I got my degree in applied anthropology. I've always been interested in city government. Records is just always been up my alley. I've worked for museums, the state archives, so it just seemed like a really good fit. And so far, it feels good to be here.
Great.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome.
We're glad to have you
Thank you.
so that we can have more of Scarlett's time.
There you go.
Great, thank you.
You're still keeping the night shift too, right, Scarlett?
And the weekend shift, yeah.
But we will give up the weekend shift. And maybe the Friday shift, or we'll move to every other.
Well, we're glad that you're here and taking over the duties. So now we'll go on to the training. The Planning Commission is required to have, what is it, 4 hours of training a year?
Yes.
And so since we didn't have any big items tonight, we thought it would be a good chance for us to do this. There are some things that you can do online, but we're all here together and can ask questions, watch it. So with that, I'll turn it over to either Ty or Scarlett, whichever is going to run it.
Actually, Ryan's going to bring it up, and we actually, in addition to what I put in the packet, is the new, is the bill. They haven't got it codified yet, but it's the bill that requires the training. As you can see, it's on what's called page 21, like the
What bill number is it?
4th page in your packets, House Bill 409. I believe this was the second substitution. I can't remember which ended up actually being passed, but you can see there on page 21 that they've really increased the training that's going to be required. Along with that, or I don't know if the trust knew what was coming, we use Utah Local Government Trust for our liability insurance, and they do a lot of training for us, and they've contracted with a third party, correct?
They have.
And I'll let Ryan talk to you a little bit more about that, but they've contracted with a third party and have some excellent training available. And the thing about some of this training that you take, if you look at the state auditor's website and you take their training, then you answer some questions and fill out some things, and then they will send you, you can print off, they don't send it, you can print off a form that says you took the training. On the training that's going to come from the trust, we will be able to keep track of all that through their programs. And I'll let Ryan talk to you more about that.
Do you want us to show the state auditor's training? Should we
If
pull
you
that
would
one up?
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
fine.
Oh.
And then you can tell
You
them,
didn't include a URL, did you?
I'm sorry,
That's all right.
audit.utah.gov, or auditor, .utah.gov, I think. And then there should be, if you go,
So in addition to the training that we see here, we're going to do a little state auditor one, right?
go to local governments.
We'll find it here real quick.
And then if you go up, yeah. Then is there video up at the top on the blue banner? There you go. And you should, I think it's the first one, actually. Nope, that's the sign in.
Here.
Man, I got my hands stuck.
Okay.
It was not a great.
So with most of them, one of the things we have when we have trainings is that oftentimes we don't get every member to attend, or we get most but not all. And then we don't get you to turn in your certification that you had the training. And that's one of the benefits the trust will give us, is it will track the training you do. You'll be able to do it at home. You'll have a login based on your email address, and we'll roll out some mandatory trainings that way. So anyway, that is what we will do for trainings. It will help us to be able to have a tracking mechanism so that we know what training we've rolled out and which one's been taken. But as we do this one, I would make sure, just a second here.
Brian, will you be notifying us by way of email that you're going to be sending us?
Right, you'll get a notice by email that would be which training it is for when we get to required ones. So, and we're just in the process of rolling that out, so it might be a bit. So, but one we ought to show you, how many of you have ever been to the luau? Raise your hand if you have attended or been to the luau. You've been to luau site, you've been to, you know what luau means? Yes, I am. Absolutely. Thank you. There we go. I'm looking for a few hands that knew what the luau was. Meg Ryan in the luau. You've been there, you know her? When you first came on, yeah. At that point, it's a good one to do each year. And there are a number of those. So.
You used to have a class at the university up here.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good resources on here. So, and to have Meg Ryan as a celebrity to be there, promote all those. If she plays on that, that's pretty fun to have a name that you can play that way. But I would encourage you to go on. There's lots of resources. They've done an amazing job to be able to put this together. And there is a lot of different trainings available. We would encourage that you attend when they do have that training come back. We would encourage you to attend. But as you look up, item that's coming up on your agenda and you say, hey, I don't remember that one. This is a great resource for training. So anyway, and for the audience, great resource. If you want to understand how some things work and what the processes are, this is well done. So if the public wants to participate that way. So anyway, on to the much anticipated.
Brian, can I ask a question?
You certainly can.
Is there a way to have this screen on as well? My regular eyes and then my reading glasses. It's terrible.
Pull it closer to you.
Thank you very much.
Better?
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan. Absolutely. See if that one. Signal. I can't make this thing come up. Well, I'm not sure I can make this one come up.
It says it's checking. It's thinking.
Low signal. Oh, I do.
Thank you.
See if the volume works here.
So we have Mrs. Perry here also. She's on the historic Preservation Commission. She has to do some of the training. She thought she'd come down here tonight.
Hello.
Good. Before we continue, keep in mind that this video is an overview, and exceptions may exist based on your entity type. So what's considered an open and public meeting? It's when a governing body majority meets to discuss or act upon government business. It includes the meetings sometimes referred to as workshops or executive sessions. Regular meetings, public hearings, electronic meetings, and emergency meetings are all open and public meetings. Open and public meetings don't include chance or social meetings. A public hearing is a type of open and public meeting where citizens have a reasonable opportunity to speak. Public hearings happen when a government adopts a budget or imposes or increases taxes or fees. An electronic meeting is a type of open and public meeting that's convened electronically, such as via phone or the internet. Remember, the governing body must adopt a resolution, rule, or ordinance allowing and governing electronic meetings. An open and public meeting may be closed to discuss any of the following: a person's character, competence, or health, security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, collective bargaining, litigation, purchase, sale, or lease of property if an open discussion would prevent the entity from completing the transaction on the best terms, investigations of criminal misconduct, and private or protected information for the Utah Procurement Code, including trade secrets. 2/3 of the governing body need to vote yes to close a meeting. Quick math lesson. 2 divided by 3 equals 66.7%. Let's say your governing body has 5 members. If 3 out of the 5 members vote yes, that equals 60%, which is not equal to or greater than 66.7%, which means you're 1 member short and instead need 4 out of 5 members to vote yes. During a closed meeting, a governing body can't interview someone applying to fill an elected position, discuss filling a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, discuss the character, competence, or health of a person whose name was submitted for consideration to fill a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, or approve any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment. If a closed meeting is discussing a person's character, competence, or health, or security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, no recording or minutes are required. However, the presiding member needs to sign a sworn written statement stating such. If the closed meeting is held for any other reason, a recording must be made. Emergency meetings may be held to discuss an urgent matter due to unforeseen circumstances. In order to hold the meeting, the best notice that's feasible is provided of the time, location, and topics to be considered. An attempt is made to contact all governing body members, and the governing body majority approves the meeting. Entities that hold regular meetings need to provide notice at least annually of the year's meeting schedule. As always, the notice must include date, time, and place. For entities that don't hold regularly scheduled regular meetings, 24 hours notice must be provided. All meetings, whether regularly scheduled in advance over the course of the year or scheduled as needed, must provide no less than 24 hours notice of meeting agendas. If a public hearing is held, public notice requirements change. Make sure to distinguish between regular meeting notice requirements and public hearing notice requirements. For regular meetings, an entity is only required to notify a newspaper and doesn't need to pay to publish a notice. For public hearings, notice must be published in at least one issue of a newspaper. If a newspaper of general circulation isn't available, written notice is posted in 3 public places within the entity's boundaries. Regular meetings require 24 hours notice. Public hearings require 7 days notice. For both regular meetings and public hearings, written notice must be posted at the principal office of the governing body, or, if no such office exists, at the building where the meeting will be held. Governing bodies must also provide notice of open and public meetings on the public notice website at publicnotice.utah.gov. By posting on the website and providing the email of the local newspaper, governing bodies can also meet the requirement to notify a newspaper. However, other requirements such as publishing in a newspaper still apply. Typically, posting on the public notice website is done by the records officer, recorder, or clerk. However, it's the governing body's responsibility to ensure notice is provided. State Archives has prepared a training manual and quick guide for owners and posters, as well as training videos that can be accessed at their website at archives.utah.gov. If your entity is increasing a fee or undergoing truth and taxation for a property tax increase, be aware that there are additional notice and posting requirements. Public meeting agendas need to include reasonably specified topics to be considered, with each topic listed under a separate agenda item on the meeting agenda. The governing body may not consider a topic in an open meeting that wasn't on the agenda. If a new topic not on the agenda is raised by the public during an open meeting, the governing body may discuss the topic. However, final action may not be taken on the new topic during that meeting. Meeting minutes and an audio recording are required for all open meetings, with limited exceptions. When an open or closed meeting is required to be recorded, it must be unedited and contain all the portions of the meeting. Recordings of open meetings must be made available within 3 days. Every entity needs to establish procedures for the governing body's approval of minutes. Pending minutes are written minutes prepared in draft form and are subject to change before being approved by the governing body. Pending minutes must contain a clear indication, such as a draft or pending watermark, that the governing body hasn't yet approved the minutes and that they're subject to change. Pending minutes must be made available within 30 days. Approved minutes are written minutes of a meeting that have been approved by the governing body. Approved minutes are the official record of the meeting and must be made available within 3 business days. Whoever is responsible for taking the minutes during meetings, typically the records officer, recorder, or clerk, needs to be familiar with what OPMA requires be contained in the minutes. When a governing body closes a meeting, the following must be publicly announced and entered into the minutes of the open meeting at which the closed meeting was approved. The reason or reasons for holding the closed meeting, the location where the closed meeting will be held, and the vote of each member of the governing body either for or against the motion to close the meeting. The recording and any minutes must include the date, time, and location of the meeting, the names of the governing body members present and absent, and the names of all others present except where disclosure would infringe on the confidentiality necessary to fulfill the original purpose of closing the meeting. For more information, access our local government resource center at resources.auditor.utah.gov.
Now the chair will conduct the quiz.
Okay. So it sounds like we can go to resources.
Resources.auditor.utah.gov. Bring that back up. Resources.auditor.utah.gov.
Dot Utah. At Utah.
Utah.
Resources.auditor.utah.gov.
But the Land Use Academy Luau's is Planning Commission specific. That's where you'll get, yeah, that's where Planning Commission specifically is held. They got lots of good training. Some are really fairly enjoyable to watch. Kind of funny.
What's Ryan doing over there? But it's kind of- Okay, so open and public meetings, and that is why when we leave here, we've closed the meeting and we can't stand around and talk about what decisions were made. We have to leave and make sure that we're following everything that needs to be done because it's being filmed. So we just need to be sensitive about that.
Then we discuss what we voted on, and why.
Well, we should do it while we're doing it.
When you're sitting in the chair.
I don't know, but I'd like to discuss it with Joe.
You can, you just can't have,
You don't want the public to be part of it? That's part of the deal of being part of a planning commission, so the public understands the debate and discussion.
can't have a quorum. And we have a quorum if we're all here and the meeting is closed.
So if I meet Joe in the grocery store and we're both wearing masks, we can talk about it? I'm not asking you. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want me to show the video again?
That would be a chance meeting.
Maybe.
I have one question that said the minutes is supposed to have all who are in attendance. Does that include those who are in the audience?
Yes, they should
That's
have
why we
signed
had a
in.
sign in,
We had a sign-in sheet. You guys both signed?
but it's blank.
The minutes that they were referring to, where the audience has to actually be put in the minutes, was a closed meeting. Unless the purpose of the closed meeting would be defeated if the minutes reflected who was there. But for a closed meeting, you don't just use an attendance sheet. For a closed meeting, you actually put who is in the meeting. So that's what it was talking about for the writing the attendance right into the minutes of the closed meeting.
Thank you, Scott. I'm so glad we have you to help us. Okay, so the next thing is the understanding variances. It's a waiver or modification of the requirements of a land use ordinance as applied to a parcel or property. And this came about, Chad Woolley did this one for, who all was in that meeting?
The appeal authority.
Oh, the appeal authority, that's right. And there are some things that are appropriate to appeal and there are some things that are not. And so his training relies on that information, passing that on to us. In case somebody says, I want to get a variance, here's what qualifies as a variance. So.
That's me. Should have remembered which one that one was. Do you remember what the,
Oh, is it? So you've been there, right? That's Ryan running on, no, it isn't. That's Scarlett.
Oh, no, it's not. I'm not running through sand.
Actually, it's like on cement.
do you remember which state? Do you remember which state it was that,
Drive the boat through that.
I need to run into my desk really quick, Ryan, and I'll come back with that date.
One of our daughters, her son was pitching to her, broke her fingers.
Yeah.
Are we having a hard time pulling it up just for those who are wondering why we're not doing anything? That might be watching online.
yes, we're pulling it up. Technical difficulty.
Okay. I'm just trying to inform the people who are watching.
I get that. I get it too.
I sent that while we were waiting. I sent that email out to everyone about the meeting down in St. George, but I didn't get a response from anyone. I guess I'll have to come back and report.
So you're gonna go? I was just down there. I would like to go. But I don't know that I can behind already. Same here, I'll be back in the woods.
Rather expensive motel.
Hmm?
Expensive motel.
But I've been to one of these before and the information was very helpful. Should we go on to training number 3 while you're trying to pull that up, or is that also on the?
Let's find out.
We're gonna go to training number 3.
Could you tell me the,
January 21st or October 8th was the one that with Kathleen's request, January 21st was the one that was kind of most recent.
we could do Kathleen's. It was what day?
January 21st, 2021 or October 28th. I mean, October 8th, 2020.
January. You say it was January's what?
21st, I thought that's what it said.
30. That one looks like it's,
Roads are not adequate. Yeah.
sorry, I didn't cue that one up. Oh, here we go.
Good to see that.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
I believe so.
And this is this
Let me
number
back
3?
up here. Okay, can you see that? Start, it should say,
Yeah.
that's an older slide. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. Thought I was ready here.
Technical support, right, Chad?
Chad is not
Oh,
live.
he's
This is
not
a
live?
video,
Oh, okay.
so he won't answer you.
Try one more time here. I apologize. That's why 2 of those were showing up on me. There we go. This is the one I wanted. Okay, so with a variance request, I think it was Mr. Bostrom that talked about the five items that come along with variance request, and these are the 5 things. And in the red, I just kind of zeroed them down to what they are. There has to be an unreasonable hardship. There has to be special circumstances. There has to be a substantial property right. It cannot be contrary to the public interest, and substantial justice needs to be done. And substantial justice is kind of a catch-all. So those are the 5 areas. And then my little form here just kind of walks through the different things. Unreasonable hardship has 2 pieces to it. Circumstances have to be peculiar to the property, and it has to be located on or associated with the property. Cannot be self-imposed, and it cannot be economic. And then under the special circumstances, it has to relate to the hardship complained of, and it has to deprive the property owner of privileges granted to other properties. Okay, and then again, it has to be a substantial property right. And I can't see my slide, so I don't know. Variance. Okay, the variance. It basically, this is kind of the public interest side of it, is that it can't substantially affect the general plan, and it can't be contrary to the public interest. Okay, so those are all the things, but what the the law tells us that if I can get this to move again, the law tells us that that none of these can be, they all have to be met. And while I do think that there are some things that are met by this particular variance, if you go kind of through the code, or through the screen here, I'm having a heck of a time getting my slideshow. There we go. In this case, is there an unreasonable hardship? I would argue that obviously this is located on the property, but it's not really circumstances peculiar to the property, in the sense that, and on the other side of it, it cannot be self-imposed. Now, I have a green check mark here on this cannot be self-imposed, because I always hate saying that something is self-imposed, but just on the conversation of one of the problems you got is that the house was built out as all the way to the edges of the setback. And Mr. Bostrom even mentioned that they knew they were going to have to build into the, that they were going to have to put 3-foot window wells or something on this and so forth. They could have built the house back a foot from that in order to put the window wells. I would argue that this was self-imposed in this situation, but even not, it's an economic issue. Again, there's economics here. Money can fix it. And so it's not in the city's position. This doesn't create an unreasonable hardship. Under special circumstances, of course, this is related to the hardship that they're complaining of, but it does not deprive them of privileges granted to other properties. There's no other properties that have that privilege that they're asking for. And so it just doesn't. Is it a substantial property right? Is it a substantial property right to be able to build a 3-foot window well a foot into the setback? I argue no, it's not a substantial property right. Does it substantially affect the general plan? I would say no. I mean, it probably doesn't affect the general plan in the grand scheme, but on the other side, it is contrary to public interest in the sense that it does go against what the variance code is meant, or the land use code is meant for, is to keep us doing keep people following the law. And so as you see on the grand scheme of things, there's arguably 4 or 5 things that they fall into here, but there are a lot of them that they don't fall into, and they have to meet every single one of these categories, and unfortunately they simply don't. So therefore this isn't something that fits a variance. And again, one of the things that I tell people all the time is that a variance is a very, very slim, narrow area that allows people to do things when their property, it fits these very narrow conditions. So anyway, that would be the city's argument.
You can see from the diagram the different required elements when it comes to a variance. So when we talk about a variance, they're rare. They have to fulfill all of them. And you can see that from that's a lot of items to be able to verify and show. Kathleen's gone through the process, and I think this helped when you went through it. But we have forwarded several people on to see this piece of the appeals hearing. I think you did a good job. So anyway, that's kind of a summary. If you have questions, we can forward them on to him, but he isn't live.
most of you are familiar with the fact that I bought a house. I was trying to make egress windows in the basement. I only had, it can go 2 feet. The edge of the house was only 10 feet from the property line. And the code allows me to put it 2 feet, but not 3 feet. So I had a large enough window cut, and it has a window well, but the window well is only 2 feet away from the house as opposed to 3. So that means that from a moral standpoint, I can feel like people can get in and out of there if there was a problem. But because of the code only allowing the 2 feet, well, as you look at the criteria, I shouldn't have even gone to the variance. Because if I had seen that, I would know right away that there's not a substantial hardship. And to go outside of what is required by the code is not, it just didn't meet the criteria. So.
But you didn't have a problem doing it, right? It was all up to code by you going out the 2 feet. That's code, right?
That I cannot call that room a bedroom. You have to have 3 feet.
3 foot well.
Yeah. So it's a room. And from a moral standpoint, if something happens, I know people can get in and out of there. But a great big fire person with all their gear on probably would not be able to fit down in that window well. So anyway, as we compared the criteria to my project, there were several areas that didn't match. So I really shouldn't have even gone to the variance committee because I didn't qualify. So, okay. The next thing on the agenda is the planning commission's role in land use applications and approvals. So Scarlett is going to fill us in on that.
In your packet, towards the end of the packet, it has Providence City Code, Chapter 2, Section 1, Planning Commission. And state code gives a municipality, in fact, it doesn't just give them, it requires them to have a planning commission if you're going to do land use things, because the planning commission plays an integral part in that. So Providence City created a planning commission. And if you read through this section of our city code, that is telling you about how the makeup of the planning commission. And then it talks about the planning commission duties. Except when otherwise expressly provided, the planning commission shall do the following: perform all functions and duties permitted or required of a planning commission by Chapter 9A, Section 302, Title 10 of the Utah Code as amended. And we'll go over that in just a second. And then it tells who your staff is, what the staff role is, and then it gives you the ability to establish procedures for how you conduct your meetings within the framework of the Utah Code. And so you do have bylaws, and I didn't put them in the packet, but you do have bylaws that help you with your procedures. The other thing,
They're on the website.
they are on the
Planning Commission.
website as
I
well.
think you put them down, they were very small.
The other thing that our city council did back in 2007, the state code changed some things, and it made it possible for cities to assign land use authorities. And our city council, that prior to that, a subdivision staff would work with the developer. It would go to the planning commission. The planning commission would make a recommendation, and then it would go to city council. So it was a fairly cumbersome process. And the unfortunate thing about subdivisions is, and most development actually, is an administrative decision. And so even though the council is our legislative body, there are times when they act administratively. And people don't understand that. And so the public would get frustrated when they would go to the city council with all kinds of reasons why a development shouldn't take place. And yet the city council, acting administratively, had to go down the checkbox of the code. And if it met our city code, whether they really liked the development or not, the development had to be approved because it met the city code. It met the state code, it met the city code, met all the requirements. So we couldn't technically turn it down. And sometimes that turned kind of political and was kind of unfortunate. So our city council felt like the planning commission, they felt like what they wanted our planning commission to do was really work on land use ordinances and general plans, and then do the approval of subdivisions. So in Providence City Code, Chapter 2, or excuse me, Title 2, Chapter 4, it says there is created a land use authority which shall consist of the planning commission for all subdivisions, and a body, administrative land use, to include the city administrative services director, the public works director, and the city engineer for all other land use applications. So pretty much at that point in time, the planning commission's role was to work on land use ordinances, general plans, and subdivision plats. Then, as we got a little bit more involved in some of the types of developments that we wanted, and I apologize, I will get you these sections of our city code, but you also have a role in multifamily, the multifamily design standards. You had a role in recommending those standards as a land use ordinance, and then you have a role in it as an approval authority for design standards for multifamily developments. You also have a role as an approval authority for mixed use developments. With commercial subdivisions, your role is at the subdivision level, but then as each site comes in and they come in for site plan approvals on each lot in the commercial subdivision, those site plan approvals go to the administrative land use authority. So your role is, and the same with a traditional residential subdivision. You see it as a subdivision and you approve that. And once you've approved that subdivision, then as the houses are built, if they're built in areas that contains this sensitive areas, they come and see the administrative land use authority for a conditional use. If they're not, if they don't have to have any type of conditional use associated with them, they go through staff, they go through our zoning office specialist, and she goes through and makes sure that their site plan is compliant with the city code. So your role in residential subdivisions ends with the approval of the final plat. Those are pretty much your approval roles that you have. You have the plat process for subdivisions. You have the design standards on a multifamily. And you have, oh, I forgot one. You have the approval of mixed use, whether they're subdividing or not. You're the approval body for a mixed use development. And you're also the approval body for a life cycle LCR, life cycle residential development. You're the approval body on that. So you see it through the subdivision stage, through the site plan stage, until it gets to the construction stage. And once you've approved it through the site plan stage, moves into this construction stage, then it's back in the role, or it's back in the staff's hands. So our planning commission has a pretty active role in our active land use applications. The other thing that's really important for the planning commission to do is to really think about the general plan and the future of the city as it relates to the general plan, because you have a really big role in general plan implementation and preparation and the approval process. But your role in the approval process, you have your role in the general plan, in the preparation, You work with the consultants, or we work within the staff, however the city decides to do it. And we put together the draft of the amendments or the draft of the general plan. We hold stakeholder meetings, steering committee meetings, public information meetings, all types of things to get the word out and to get public involved and get their comment in the general plan. And you make recommendations throughout that preparation period of the general plan. Once the general plan is prepared and the final draft is submitted, then you make a recommendation to the city council on whether you recommend they approve it or they reject it and do something different. Generally, you would be recommending approval because you should have worked through all the kinks that you think you have, but
It would not be
But-
smart if we
but
didn't do
there's
it.
always a time when maybe last minute you hear something and you feel like, oh, maybe this little section shouldn't be approved right now at this time. So you make a recommendation to the city council. You also are fairly active involved in land use ordinances, the subdivision ordinances and the zoning ordinances on a recommending level. Staff works with you to put together ordinances that you feel confident in recommending to the city council. So you recommend, but you don't approve general plans or land use ordinances. Your recommendation is important. But the hard thing about being the recommending body is that you can work really, really hard and put your heart and soul into it. And you can come up with an excellent plan, but the city council does not have to adopt that plan. They can make changes to it. They can tell us to start over. They have the final say. They don't have to follow the Planning Commission's recommendation. They don't have to follow the Planning Commission's recommendation on an ordinance. Again, sometimes that's a difficult role as a recommending body to have your work not, it's appreciated, but sometimes when it's not approved, you don't feel like it was. But from watching both bodies work for many, many years, I can tell you that whether a city council follows your recommendation or not, they appreciate the time and the effort that went into it. And they do consider the basis of the recommendation and they weigh it against what other factors come into play. But the city council, they do recognize the importance of planning commissions in the land use acts. When we do annexations, you have a role in annexations at the annexation policy plan. The annexation policy plan is often included in the general plan, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a standalone plan. Ours happens to be included in the general plan, but you have the role there with annexations to say, here's where we recommend we expand our boundaries to. And you look at the area and there are a series of things that you have to consider by state code, how we're going to get facilities, economic impact of the area on current and future citizens. There's a lot of stuff that goes into putting together a annexation policy plan. Again, you're the recommending body. You're the preparer and the recommender. And then it goes on to city council. One thing I neglected to say that I should have, the general plan and the annexation policy plan, they are plans. They are not code. They're not law, but they are plans and they're very influential. And you have to understand the importance of those plans. When someone calls to ask a staff member, when they say we're interested in a particular type of development, where would Providence City consider having this? We pull out the general plan. We look at that map and we talk with that developer about that. So then when you may have very good reason for deviating, but when you deviate from that, that makes it really kind of difficult for staff, because as you learned from our sewer master plan discussion a couple of weeks ago, we look at how you've recommended the city go and how the city council has approved that the city go in that general plan. And that's how we design infrastructure. That's what we started with. That's why we had to do the general plan before we did each individual master plan, because the general plan is our guide. It's where you guys project the city will go, not only where it is right now, we know where it is right now, it's where it's going. And it's where, when Ryan sits down to do a capital projects budget, it's where we look to say, what type of development are we going to have in this area? What kind of facilities do we need? So when we start deviating a lot from that, that has a ripple effect that falls into the public works infrastructure and can create a little bit of difficulty or a snag or two if we deviate too awfully far. Now, again, we realize that plans are only for 6 years or so, and we need to constantly be looking and updating and refreshing, but still, they do carry long-term impacts. So we as staff fall on our swords for those plans. And I want to express my appreciation to the planning commissions and the city councils that have worked diligently to put those plans together, because without them, then we do go willy-nilly. We are more at the developers' mercy. So we really appreciate those plans. The annexation plan, once you've approved where it's annexed, and once you've approved the future zoning in the general plan, then your role in annexations is complete. That's why when somebody files an annexation petition, it goes directly to city council, and city council goes through the steps, is because the planning commission and the public have already had their chance to speak and to recommend through the annexation policy process and through the general plan process. So I know sometimes recently people have been frustrated because they felt like annexation should start in the planning commission. Really, they did. They do. It's this, they start at a different level. They start at that annexation policy plan and at the general plan. And then once those are approved, the state code says you can rely on those cities. Now move forward with your legislative body taking over the annexation process. Now, there's been a couple of changes in state code, and I haven't seen the codified code on it yet for the annexation policy plan. But one of the things they have done is they're kind of doing like we did here in Providence. If somebody requested a zone that was not what the general plan called for, then we made that person go to the planning commission anyway, because we didn't take up any extra time to do it. We did it through the 30-day protest period so that it didn't add time onto their application or anything. And it didn't annex the property, so we weren't outside the realm of state code, but we would schedule a public hearing to discuss a zone that was different than the general plan. But that was the only time that we would bring them into you. So if it was something that the planning commission had discussed, if the planning commission said, yes, that's where we want it, the developer came in, said, here's the property I want to annex, it's in your plan. Here's the zone I want to ask for, it's in your plan. Then we would just move it straight to city council. So that's how annexation works. And that's how you have a very important role in the annexation process, is through those plans that actually take months to put together in order to be prepared. If
Can I ask a question? If somebody wants to annex in and they want to change from the general plan code to something else, that comes to planning commission, right?
does,
Okay.
we wait until the city council considers an annexation for further consideration. Because when an annexation petition comes in, even if it's in the city council's or even if property is included within our annexation policy plan, if for some reason the city council doesn't feel like they have the infrastructure or some other reason, if for some reason they feel like the timing just isn't right to annex that, they can turn it down right at that first step for further consideration. So we don't start the public hearing process for any kind of zone recommendation until after we know if the council is really going to consider that property. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to annex it when they accept it for consideration. It just means that they're turning it over into the city recorder, the city attorney, the county, into their hands to look at that petition and make sure that it contains all the components that it needs. And the city recorder, they can work with staff, they can work with city engineers, they definitely need to work with the attorney and the county to make sure that all those components are there. But the city recorder is the one that, once the planning commission says, yeah, we'll consider this further, then the city recorder is the one that needs to make sure all those steps take place. And then
The
they,
city council, you said the
City
planning
council.
commission. It's
Yes.
the city council.
oh, I'm sorry, city council.
Okay.
Then the city recorder makes sure all those steps take place. And if they do, then they get to certify the petition and move on to the next step. If they don't, then they unfortunately have to do like Ty and I did this week, and they tell someone that their petition was deficient and it's rejected. And then at that point, the annexation stops. It's done. If the recorder certifies that, that's when, if the petitioner has requested a zone different than the planning commission, different than the general plan, that's when the city recorder will put out a notice of pending, a notice of petition for annexation. And that notice has to be published and has to tell people how to protest the annexation, all of that type of thing. And it gives a 30-day period from the date that the notice of certification goes out for the protest period. So during that 30 days, staff is looking at additional information from the applicant to try and put together an annexation agreement for the city council to review as part of that annexation coming in. We are also, if they're asking for a zone other than what's recommended on the general plan, we're scheduling a public hearing to go through the planning commission for recommendation. So it's during that period. If someone protests, then everything we've done is on hold until the boundary commission reviews the annexation protest. Now, the boundary commission can make a decision that Providence City shouldn't annex that property for whatever reason, but the boundary commission can't make the city annex that property. The boundary commission can say, Providence City, if you want to annex, you can, or they can say, Providence City, you can't annex this property for whatever reason, but they can't force us to take a property. So then once it gets out of the boundary commission's hands,
Who is the boundary commission?
that's set up by the county.
Okay.
That's through the county. Once it's out of their hands, then it comes back into the city council's hands, and the city council has to hold a public hearing, regardless of whether everything is being followed in the annexation policy plan and the general plan. The city council still has to hold a public hearing before they can actually make that final annexation decision. And then once it's annexed, it's done by ordinance. Now, that doesn't change our city code, but it changes our municipal boundaries. And then the interesting thing about it is it's not annexed yet. Then comes back into the city recorder's plate again, and the city recorder needs to work with the petitioner to get I just lost the name of the map. There's a particular name, but it's an annexation plat. And that has to be signed by the mayor, and it has to be signed by the county surveyor. Once the petitioner has those two signatures on that plat, then the county notifies Providence City,
And then the city recorder prepares a notice of impending boundary change, puts the map with it, puts the ordinance that the city council passed with it, and sends it to the lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor's office reviews that paperwork, and once they feel that they have everything, then they give us a certificate of annexation. Then Providence City takes that certificate of annexation, the ordinance, and the plat back to the county, and the county records it. And then the annexation is complete. Then the city recorder has to notify a couple other parties after that, but that's the steps to get a property annexed. So
To get all that time.
Carla, is our annexation plan in the city plan?
yes,
Okay, and how often do we have to update our city plan?
Well, let's talk about how often it has been, rather than how long it is.
Oh, I know how long
So-
it has been. It's
So
a long time.
when you consider an amendment to it, keep in mind that the last plan from start to finish took almost 3 years and was just adopted less than a year ago. And generally, general plans don't change 7 to 9 years, something like that. So they generally last longer than most master plans. But you build a general plan and we're going to build sub-master plans for the next 3 years. This is a big master document. To make a modification to it has huge domino effects into the other plans.
I don't remember there was something about we had to have supposed to have a new master plan every 10 years.
Yeah, about every 10 years. And the time difference between the two, the one just adopted, one before was, I think, 20 years.
Oh, yes, I know.
but that doesn't mean that you can.
You can't, yeah, right.
Now, we updated sections
Yeah.
because we added certain sections in that, in the plan that was passed in 2000. But it was 20 years before we did a complete comprehensive redo. The moderate income housing element of the general plan needs to be considered. Used to be every 2 years. I'm going to have to look and see if they changed that. But we have to do a report annually on how we're doing with our moderate income housing plan. And that report has to be filed with the state. But I think the plan itself has to be reviewed every 2 years. And we also have to file that review with the state. We have to put together a report that says we've reviewed it, updated certain features, and file that with the state. So there are elements of the general plan that do get reviewed more often than the overall general plan. But generally, an overall general plan, if you've put good thought into it, since you've got all of these other master plans that are building on that, generally that plan is going to be a pretty good guide for about 10 years. And within that time, as things start to change and move, you'll be able to make amendments, but you have to think long and hard about those. Like I said, because we've based a lot of assumptions on a lot of other plans, and a lot of infrastructure funding money goes into it once you give us the green light on a general plan and a master plan. So,
But I like the fact that you put a general plan in place, and in the world we live today, tomorrow is going to be different than you thought it was. But with a plan like that, we can do modifications and we can make changes as population and circumstances change. So that's encouraging.
I think the thing that's hard for people in your seats, it's hard for people and it's hard for staff, but it's particularly hard for people in your seats because honestly, staff can pass the buck. I can say, I'm just staff. All I can do is look at the plan and tell you what the plan says and let's design to the plan. They realize you can make recommendations, and the city council, people realize they can actually change it. But you have to be really careful on changing a plan because a plan is supposed to take into consideration the future or the current citizens, of course, we want to have a good, safe community for our current citizens and a well-run, well-developed community for our current citizens. But that plan also has to look to the future. And that plan has to look to places for future development. And so that's the hard part, is because looking out to the future, for one thing, it takes a crystal ball to a degree, but it also kind of upsets the apple cart a little bit because it's generally changes. I mean, when you're looking to the future, you're looking at different type of lots, different type of developments. Perhaps we're looking at multifamily, something not as traditional as single family housing on very large lots. And you have to look at all kinds of things and think about what will be needed in the future, what the grandkids of today will need in 20 years. And the common citizen doesn't have to think about that. They just think about their property tax, their property value. I mean, they think about very, very important things. I am not diminishing their concerns one bit, but they don't have the role that you have to look out 10, 15 years and plan for the people that are going to be living here.
For the excellent training.
Passionate.
Well,
I know what we went
I am
through.
passionate on it because it is important.
It is.
And you guys are excellent. And I am really, truly very sympathetic of the role that you play in, that listening to comments is tough when you can empathize with those people and you understand exactly where they're coming from. And yet you have this other little part of you that has to look for something that may not come to fruition. But we keep having people, keep having kids.
On that one though, Scarlett, and I come back to one of the comments you made. The staff defers some to the legislative body and planning commission that those are some of the more decision-making on long-term items. But you can defer back to the master plan. Oftentimes that has included great amounts of community input and public hearings and all of that. It isn't just work that you have done. Oftentimes it is multiple councils or several different things that have considered. I mean, you look at our transportation plan or our parks, trails, and recreation master plan that came. You had an input. We had hundreds of people from the public give input. So when a plan comes or an amendment comes, and it's backed by one resident or maybe a dozen or maybe 100. But at that point, at some point, you have the general plan. When it is adopted, it is something that is the overriding umbrella. It is what the expectation of both planning, council, staff, and the general public want the city to be in the future. So I would take, we have somebody that it's talked about a potential. I would say when that was done and that item was looked at on the general plan, that area was evaluated and said, there is probably going to be commercial. So let's assume that the plans, let's roll forward 10 years, 20 years down the road, and there is another Macy's, there is another grocery store, a Target, a Walmart that sits adjacent where the property is to the east. And now you have built or potentially either have built mixed use, which includes commercial and residential. You have allowed a modification, which was a medium density multifamily, and that's what they had asked for when they did come with zoning. So at some point you got to think, if all builds out according to plan, you could be placing this development next to the next Macy's, or I mean, it's commercial, maybe a car dealership, and you say what should be between that and residential home. And if you can see the plan, then you get to look out and say, based on the plan and bigger items than just what is there today, you make those decisions, and then the staff works to make that happen. But those are the kind of things you'll look out, and maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. There is modifications. But keep in mind, if it took you 3 years to get to the plan, how quickly should you modify it? Just keep that in mind as when you open it up. Are you prepared for the other things that it does? And that shouldn't dissuade you if there was a mistake. But there's a lot of work that goes into a lot of those things in each level of the plans. And that's what I would caution, is just keep in mind how much work went to get you to where you are with your plans. So.
And we did sit down with other cities. Rowan and Bob were involved in some of this. Rowan particularly the longest, I think, but Bob too. But we've met with the neighboring communities. We met with the county. We met with the Cache Valley Transit District folks. We involved a lot of people in putting together that general plan. We had a couple of focus groups that had about 30 to 50 people in those different groups that came in and did some role play planning, and that our consultants led them through different scenarios. The public was invited. We set up storyboards when this building went, after we finished the remodel and we opened the building, we combined our open house with our general plan modifications, and we had storyboards set up in here and active boards that people could make comments on things they wanted to see in Providence. And we had, I can't remember, a couple hundred people. I was really pretty impressed with the amount of people that came. I don't know whether some of them came to see the building and then ended up doing the general plan, and some came to see the general plan and ended up doing the building, but it was a good mix. We had a good mix. So there was a lot of people that participated in the putting together of that general plan. So, and if you start to do amendments, you start to looking at trying to get a broad spectrum of view for that amendment as well.
One other thing is that they had a whole city layout, little buildings to put on wherever you wanted them, whether you liked them here or there. Oh man, look at that. That was 3 years of literal, a lot of pushing hard to get people to either agree with us or be able to explain why we were going against what they wanted.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting process. So anyway, that is the roles that Planning Commission plays in land use. One of my goals, now that I get the focus on the land use, is to put together diagrams similar to what we put together on the mixed use a month or so ago that led you through the process on each of the processes, not just to help the Planning Commission, but to help the public as well, to be able to see what their steps are in order to request a code amendment, request a subdivision, request a conditional use. There's more to conditional use than just site plans, but those conditional uses stay within the administrative land use authority, and so we won't get into those. With a lot of those deal with businesses that, for whatever reason, may require a conditional use. That's one of the ordinances that Ryan and I have talked about that we really want to look hard at is our conditional use ordinance. We want to make our ordinances so that there are fewer conditional uses and more direction in the ordinance for permitted uses. So anyway, if you don't have any questions, I'll sit down and be quiet.
One question, going back to the land use authority, that section 2-4-1, it says shall consist of the planning commission, administrative land use, city administrative, service director, public works director, and city engineer. Would that be
That's two different bodies.
Okay,
See that it says shall consist of the planning commission for all subdivisions,
Yeah.
semicolon, and a body, administrative land use to include the city administrative services director, public works director, and city engineer for all other land use applications.
where does the ESR fall in on that? Or doesn't it?
It falls in under the subdivision, city code under the subdivision. It talks about that the city may have review done by an executive staff that may include, and then it has the laundry list of people that the executive staff may include.
So you wouldn't plug it in on that?
No,
Okay.
the city, the executive staff, and that's one thing we've worked really hard to keep. That's a staff meeting. That's not a meeting. That's not a meeting of a body that makes a final decision of any type. That's a staff meeting where we're talking about, does this apply? Does this ordinance, have they met this ordinance? Are they following the transportation plan? Are they following the general plan? That's totally staff. And then once it comes to you, we say, we've looked at this. We feel like it's ready to go, but planning commission, you need to take a final look and you need to make the decision. That staff meeting is strictly looking at stuff from a technical administrative standpoint to say, does it meet our city code or not? So no final decisions there.
There's a few of the executive staff members, well, some of these titles here, the public works director, the city
Right.
engineer, that.
So if it's,
they're part of that ESR.
if it's something that is going to go to administrative land use, it does not go to ESR. Because we need to keep we can't hold a meeting on something, we can't hold a staff meeting on something that we are going to make a final decision on. That would turn it into a public meeting. So there are certain items that do not go to executive staff, and that's the very reason it does. Those items just get sent directly to the parties involved in administrative staff. Now, as we're doing our homework and putting our plans together, can we reach out to the fire department? You betcha. Can we reach out to other people on staff to say, what do you think about this? The building department, things like that. Yes, we can reach out to them individually, but when we hold that meeting, that's when we go over where their recommendations come from. We go over Aaron Walker's recommendation during that meeting. If the building department, if Cache County has put anything in, we go over that in that meeting so that we disclose everything in the public meeting. But the three people involved in that decision making don't talk about that at all until they sit down at the bench in a public meeting. Or on Zoom, the way we have last year. So,
Thank you.
We appreciate your work too. And it's really nice to call Scarlett and say, what about this and what about that? And she can put her fingers right on it. So
thank you.
appreciate your work.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that training. And I'm sure we're gonna have to ask more questions because there's a lot to that. And we're citizens that are trying to make the best decisions for Providence, but we need that expertise behind it. So thank you. So we've completed this training and now we've got one discussion item to go over. And that is the mixed use district. So Scarlett and Ryan and I have talked about this and Scarlett and I finally said, let's see if we can put this to bed. If you remember, the city council asked us to look at the density that was proposed for the mixed use, but we also looked at some of the other things and how they affect the city. So what Scarlett is handing out is some of the proposed changes that we've discussed in this meeting. We've discussed it like 3 times, I think. So what I'd like to do is have Ryan throw up that development, the proposed development, and Scarlett, you're on again.
I haven't handed the concept plan out yet, but I want to make it very clear. You are not reviewing this concept plan. You're looking at this as an illustration of how to apply this ordinance. This is nothing more than an illustration. It's
We're
not
not
on the,
approving, we're not turning down, we're not
Yeah.
doing anything.
it's not on the agenda for a review of this concept plan. That will come to you at some point in time, but this is an illustration.
It's
as
just
to
a
how-
picture to look at.
Yeah, an example of applying this ordinance. So
Thank you for that reminder.
staff has not, staff has started their review, but we have not put together a packet for you on this. It's just an illustration.
Thank you, Carl.
Somebody? Sorry, well, you probably have one. Oh,
Thank you.
I took your side.
No, you-
It's been a long meeting.
Would have been sent out by Diane.
Are you gonna pop this one up?
Yeah, tell me, was it sent out by Diane?
Yes, Diane. Gotta share these. Couple of things that seem to kind of have a nagging,
Always a question, always comes up when we deal with mixed use.
density is one of the things. What's an appropriate density? And it doesn't just come up in mixed use, it comes up in multifamily, comes up in single family. Density is, I don't know, it's a difficult thing for people to get a grip, to understand. They, in your mind, I think you visualize things differently than what they really are, because a lot of people don't understand what density a particular development really is built to. But in listening to the people that have come and talked to the planning commission, in talking with the development community, the people that know what works and what doesn't, we actually, after discussions, we actually chose to leave the density as it is and to tighten up some of the other things that go along with it.
It would kind of control the density piece of it.
Yeah. One of the things that that we talked about is reworking the way we presented uses within the development. We felt like maybe we weren't, while we don't want to give while we want these mixed use developments to be creative developments that work really well for a mix of commercial and residential, we keep kind of getting asked for some guidance. So what we did is we looked at the use chart in Title 10, Chapter 6, Section 1, that has the uses marked with a P or a C, or else there's a blank. If it's a blank, it means it's not allowed in that particular zone. We incorporated some of that. We summarized some of what's allowed in the mixed use. I didn't put any of the conditionals. I just put the permitted, but I incorporated some of what's in that chart into the actual text of the mixed use code. So that as a development person comes in and they're just scanning through our code to see what they can do, it's kind of right there to give them a start. Now, it does tell them that they need to see the use chart for a complete list of uses. It says that uses include but are not limited to, and then it lists some of the uses. One of the other things that we changed, and you may want to put it back in, as Kathleen talked, retail. Up until this point, this ordinance has said that a mixed-use district must include residential and retail, and may include commercial and office. And I think the way we had that worded confused a lot of people as well. And some people thought that the may actually was, and so then they would try and bring in dentist's office and stuff, which they certainly can, but then they kind of wanted to use that towards the 20%, and that wasn't really the intent. So we took out the word retail, and in its place, we put in the different types of things, some of the different types of things that can go in the uses. The other thing that we talked about,
Can I just say that when you say retail to people, a lot of times they have a tendency to think a dress shop or something that is traditionally where somebody would go shopping to get retail. But retail really encompasses a lot of things.
retail can encompass your local cosmetologist. If that person is selling product off their shelves, it can encompass a gym membership. It can encompass the coffee shop, all kinds of little things that business has to pay sales tax on. Retail encompasses all of that type of stuff. And so that's kind of what our thought process was there.
To simplify it.
Yes. The other thing that we looked at was our wording on the percentages. Prior to this, it said, and the reason why this is in red, even though it was in the original code, is because I moved it from its location to this new location. And so it's got a couple of changes in it that are struck out and underlined. That's because I took what's actually original code, moved it to a new location, and added or deleted some stuff from it. That's kind of my explanation for the little bit of different formatting there. In the current code, it says, of the uses included in the development, no one use can be less than 20% of the entire development. So that kind of meant that if somebody wanted to put a development in, they had to have at least 20% sales tax retail type business. If they wanted to put some type of a professional office next to that to help support that retail, that use had to be 20% as well, because it said each use had to be 20%, no less than 20%. So as we talked, we kind of changed the wording of that. Now it says no one use can be more than 75%. So, and you may want to change those numbers. That's totally open for discussion. But our thought process was, we don't want 100% commercial in this zone. We don't want 100% residential in this zone. We don't want 100% retail in this zone. They have other zones. Multifamily high for multifamilies. We have commercial highway district that's based on attracting businesses that generate sales tax. And we have the commercial general district that's the place for the catch-all, for the professionals. It can have businesses that generate sales tax. It can do all kinds of things. But we want the mixed use to be a mixed use. That's the whole point. It's a mixed use. And so thus the no one use can be more than 75%. So now they can have a doctor's office and take up 10% and a retail business that takes up 20% or whatever they want, but they just can't, no one business can be more than 75%. The other thing that we talked about quite a bit, and as you'll remember, and Joe, you're gonna have to help me, I just want blank on that young man's name that came and talked to us, the developer.
That you invited last time.
Sorry.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, Justin. Thank you. That was good.
How many degrees does it take to come up with a name?
Anyway, he talked about parking, pretty significant. And Ryan talked to me about parking as well. Kathleen and I had discussed parking. And then I kind of took what Ryan talked about and what Kathleen talked about, and I kind of did a little bit of a merge. And so, and I also was looking at this particular plan. Now, if you remember, Justin talked about parking on the bottom level and then the living spaces on top of it. He also talked about parking garages. So and I don't like to do this very often, but sometimes in a specialty ordinance, it seems like it makes sense to have a specific definition that's applied to that zone. And so in mixed use districts, so parking areas include parking garages and parking lots. And this was in our old ordinance, didn't talk about parking, didn't differentiate. Our old ordinance said parking areas shall be considered as structures since they present a three-dimensional appearance when occupied. And then when you get down and you realize what it takes to compute, making those parking areas into a structure really kind of will reduce the amount of multifamily that you get, because if the whole parking area has to be included in the square footage plan for the density, for the percentage of use, then and not just the building footprint, then all of a sudden there's a big difference in the way you look at a plan. So we talk about parking garages and parking lots. And then I looked up some different definitions to try and get something that kind of reflected what our discussion was. In mixed use districts, a parking garage is defined as a multi-story building that provides parking space. A parking lot is defined as an open area of hard paved surface with designated parking spaces and access aisles. And I had that they may require landscape parking medians. Kathleen talked to me about some of the trials and tribulations of having those. So we took them out, but they definitely need the access aisles. And then there's other places where we can talk about landscaping if you feel like we need to work landscaping in some of the parking lots. But our goal is to get rid of the parking lots and have them be in the parking garages and have more open area for landscape and people
Just for
to
personal space. for
enjoy.
people. Yeah.
And so,
So let me just back up just a little bit. If they do a parking structure, then that counts towards their percentage of building space. So that means they have less space and less percentage to have either the commercial or the multifamily. So we've got to figure out a way for them not to just totally turn it down, because they don't want to have to put another building that is just a parking structure. It's not going to generate cash for them.
and to incorporate what Justin talked about when he was here, and also the way this plan is being presented, I added, so the parking garage is required for occupant residential parking. So because and part of the reason I did that is because of the way it talks about parking for the commercial areas in a mixed use zone. Talks about them being able to use some street side parking and things like that. But if we want to get real serious about these parking garages for the residential area, we definitely want it to make sure that they know they've got to get the occupants in that of the they have to have enough parking spaces in the garage for the occupants of the residential units. And then based on what Justin talked about and this plan, I put on here, this is kind of the compromise. Garages contained within individual units may be considered in lieu of the parking garage. So like in this case, where every single residential unit has a garage, we wouldn't make them build another parking structure because every unit has a garage. And you've kind of achieved your, if you'd looked at the other one where it had two big buildings with no parking associated within the building structure, and then they had a whole ton of parking lot. Now, in this particular version, they've increased the grass element significantly. It may not be what you would like to see, but they have increased it significantly. So those explain the biggest changes and the reasoning behind those changes. And then I took right out of our city code, we have a section on parking. And it says in that in that portion of our city code, it says when computing parking requirements for the development, the total parking requirements shall be the sum of all the specific parking space requirements of all the buildings or uses in the development. And so they can't just pick and choose what they're going to have parking spaces for. They have to consider everything within the development and make sure they provide parking for that. Couple of things that Ryan suggested, and I'm going to apologize in advance. A couple other things came up and I wasn't able to include them, but I really do think they should be put in here. I think we should require electric charging stations. I think we should require, and I didn't get a chance to look it up on the internet, so I apologize. Those little pedal bike maintenance stations, you know, that they've got air compressors, a few things right there with the station that if you're a commuter biker, or even if you're just a recreational biking person, you can stop along the roadside or you can stop somewhere in your development and have some of those features to be able to maintain your bicycle. So I think those things, I think an area for bicycle parking, Ryan suggested, and I totally agree. I think bicycle parking, multimodal parking needs to be addressed. If we're going to encourage multimodal transportation throughout our city, through our general plan, then in these big developments that are mixing uses, adding multimodal parking features, such as bicycle parking, such as electric car charging stations, things like that, they should be considered. And I apologize, I just didn't get them written into the plan, but I do, or into the amendment, but I do think those are things that you should consider. And I'd be happy to add those when you get ready to put this on as a ordinance, public hearing, because this is an ordinance, a land use code amendment. So once you're pretty much satisfied with the wording that we've got to start with, we'll get it scheduled for public hearing. We'll get the public to come in and weigh in on it, give us their comments. You can make final changes and then get ready for a recommendation to city council. So anyway, so
Any
Ryan,
feedback? What do
Ryan
you,
or Kathleen, or want to add anything, Ryan?
I think that was good. I think if you take this diagram here and you start to add layers, and you start to take the vehicles off into a parking garage, you start to open up in that green space, and what we're looking for out of them start to really open up. But if we haven't addressed some of these other issues, then we're getting a huge parking lot and people are living in a parking lot.
the other thing that we talked about was looking to see if there are cities around in Utah or wherever who have a kind of an ordinance that says for each dwelling that people live in, there's a percentage of open space that needs to be provided. So Scarlett didn't get a chance to do that today. She was putting out fires. So, but we can certainly forward that on to you when she finds out what that might be. But I think that's, as we talk about mixed use and what we want it to look like, remember one of the developers was frustrated with us because he thought he was putting together a plan that met the criteria, but yet we still were asking him for more. And so it was really hard to define. And we feel like these changes help us define that a little better for the developer who's saying, I want to do mixed use. It seems more doable that we don't have so many different things that we're requiring, the retail, the commercial, the residential. If we say commercial, then they can look at what could be used in a commercial area and come up with their plan. There's also a report available called the leakage report. And that leakage report says how much money is flowing out of Providence on a regular basis. It's millions of dollars for cars because we don't have a car place here. And just what are people spending, but it's being spent outside of the city? Do we have businesses that could support it? Is there a reason they're going out of town to buy things? Is that because we don't have it? Well, let's help developers know what we need in Providence City and how much money is flowing out of here that could potentially stay here. So anyway, if we can help them understand better how to use the mixed use, that's what we want to do. So we feel like these changes are headed in that direction. So questions, answers, feedback?
I have one question.
Okay.
It's on page 2. It's the architectural design and materials used to be F, and we numbered as E. And it says the treatment of building mass, materials, and exterior appurtenances shall create an aesthetically pleasing building. And the word appurtenances, as I understand that, if it were in
That's
a real-
$100 word.
yeah, well, in a real property sense, water is appurtenant to land. And I don't understand that. I'm wondering if the word was intended to be appearance. And if it wasn't, what is the meaning of the word?
I'll bet that
appurtenances?
it's an autofill, looks like.
It may be. That came from the original city code, Joe, so I've got it circled and I'll look
Good
at that.
catch, Joe.
Well, I just wouldn't understand how the exterior would be appurtenant. But anyway,
We want waterfalls down the building fronts.
that'd be nice.
Or salmon going up.
With salmon trying to get up, yeah.
Tell me again where that was.
No bears though.
Yeah, that's right. Second one.
Section E,
Second one.
that's where appurtenances is. Is that what you're telling us, or do you have a comment?
Ryan,
No, I just was confirming where that
Oh, where
was.
that was? I would think appearances would be appropriate in that place.
Okay, but I actually have one other question. And again, we're not reviewing this plan. I'm just asking to try and get a picture of what you're thinking in your mind. Well, this is a really cool apartment complex because it's got pickleball courts, it's got barbecue areas, it's got splash pads, playgrounds, dog parks. That's all private. That doesn't allow any public access. And I'm just wondering, do you feel like having all of those types of amenities enhance the mixed use area or detract? I'm just curious as to when you think about amenities in a mixed use area, and Ryan's used the example of City Creek, and City Creek is a completely different model than what we're talking, but you don't really see this kind of stuff. If it's there, it's contained within the building. I mean, there's some cool landscaping features and things, but I don't know that it's got like a really neat apartment complex. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts. And if this is the kind of thought you want, then I think we need to rethink a little bit more about some of the terms we've got in our mixed use. So that's just my question.
Well, that was kind of what I was hoping would come from finding out if there are cities that require a certain amount of green space around apartments based on occupation. And so then that would make it do that. And Scarlett and I talked about, okay, there's a dog park, a playground, a splash pad. There are all these things, but if they get going and decide that they can sell another retail pad over there, those things go away. So there's nothing to have them keep those. I think these are really cool. And if I was looking for an apartment, I certainly would want an apartment with those kind of amenities. But it also can go away very quickly if they get another tenant. and they're not making any more land. And land becomes very valuable for things that these don't make any money for them. Because people are not paying to use them.
So it could go away because we didn't specify a specific amount.
Of green space per
green
resident,
Space
per unit,
per
right?
unit.
That's gonna be a tough number.
But
Well, some
even
other
if it-
cities might have something. That's why we need to look and see what other people are doing.
Or maybe that they could dedicate this all to the city. After 3 years, and let the city take it over. That's public hearing.
That does add operation and maintenance. Obviously, as an accountant, I always bring that in. So
Dollar signs.
yeah, dollar signs are always an issue. The nice thing I would add to that comment is multifamily does bring in sales tax based on population, because that is how our state divvies out sales tax dollars, and with the retail and property tax, so that does bring in tax dollars. And as we look at other items and other development opportunities, that is one of the benefits of some of these mixed use, higher density. It costs less because we have less pipe work in the ground, and there's values that brought fewer roads to maintain for the number of population. So there is a trade-off. But anyway, if we had it so that they were required to keep it open, but still maintain it, that would be ideal.
Well, and it's a great amenity. You look at it, it's really self-contained. There's the fence that surrounds the entire property except for the frontage. And for all those apartments, for the people looking at it, this is a safe place now for their children and so forth to play, and for families together and all of that. And if it's, I would think if you approve the plan based on those features being there, they would have to stay. I wouldn't, because you wouldn't want it to be that the owners could turn around and say, well, let's wipe that out and let's put more retail buildings there.
That's a good point, but what about when pickleball isn't as popular and they want to change it to tennis, or they want to change it to basketball? How specific are we going to get? I get your point, but I just posing the other option of how strict do you, once they're pickleball, do they have to keep them as pickleball forever, even when the game loses its interest?
Well, then typically, if it was residential, you'd have the HOA that could then make those decisions and adjust the funding. But if by apartments, I don't know that you have that.
That's right.
The apartment tenants have that.
Because you have the next landlord that owns it that may change.
That's the question I had, and I realize we're not reviewing a specific project. We're just using it as a tool to analyze the mixed use ordinance.
Sure.
But I always thought my voice carried. But in a project like this under the mixed use ordinance, could we require that the open space be maintained by an HOA within the thing?
If you would like to, we can put that in there. There's nothing that says we can't require that.
Or that there be tenant representation and
I think
ownership
you get
of
into too
everything
much, too
combined.
many specifics then, because then
Well,
it's like,
usually-
Providence is so hard to work with,
usually
because they got all these.
So I want to
Stay
ask
for the
you something. Why
Yeah,
wouldn't, if,
'cause that's the-
here's where I'm coming from. Why didn't we just zone this multifamily high?
Because it came as an
Initially,
option to
we
do
turned
that.
that down.
Right, initially you turned that down.
And really, that's what they've built. They've got one small building in comparison to the whole thing. And so if whenever we talk about multifamily, if your goal is to get all of these amenities along with the multifamily, then probably mixed use isn't the best thing for us.
Well, and we turned it down because this was zoned commercial. And we had another applicant for another piece of property that it was commercial and we turned it down
Yeah,
because they wanted residential.
I totally
Yeah.
get it. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate to make sure that we end up with really the type of zone that we're asking for.
I'm ready to go back and start with the density. And I don't see where any place in Providence, and I'm acting against our accountant here, but I don't see there is any place, any need, any want from the citizens here in the city to have 39 units per acre. I know this one isn't 39, but it's got to be awful high.
It's
So
not
what-
bad, actually. It's quite low.
What I see in this piece of property, is this mixed use right now or not?
It is zone mixed use. You have,
It has moved over.
it has been zoned as mixed
I
use.
see this as the ghetto of Providence. Give it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I think it'll be that. I don't, the density is way too high. You got people packed in there. The streets, hard to see back in there, hard to patrol. Or do we want the sheriff to patrol in there or not?
It's private.
It's private.
Okay, so we don't, so then they have to have their own security and that's optional to them. What about the crimes that are gonna be committed back in the back areas?
Well, I
Hidden from the
can't
street.
speak to the future, but I can speak to the present. And we've had the law enforcement people come and talk to us quite a bit. And percentage wise, of course, per capita, you run, because you've got more people, you have a little bit more crime. But honestly, they're not sitting, to date, they have not been extensively more serious. I mean, we did have one very tragic happen at the Deer Creek Apartments, very, very tragic. But we've had some problems in single family neighborhoods that are pretty tragic too. So I think
So
that-
what's the Deer Creek? What's the sheriff's opinion of the Deer Creek? Do they have more, is there more crime there?
not necessarily.
They said there wasn't.
Not based on the number of population.
I called Chad and asked him for the figures and he said he'd get those to me and he never did. He said they're available.
They are available. We've got them before.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're, you know, I mean, there's the
I've
bad
gotta
things
agree
happen.
with him. I have a trial tomorrow at 9. I have to get off at 5 to prep for it, so I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good night.
See you,
Sorry,
Joe.
I'm a believer, but I wasn't voting tonight anyway.
Nobody's voting on anything, so thanks, Joe.
Project information says there's 307 units. That right?
No,
307 units allowed.
Nine,
there's 307 units allowed, but there's only 90.
Oh, 90.
Yeah, so it's a pretty low density, actually.
I think in this case, we're catering to the developer. And we'll be beholden to the developer because it's all privately owned. And we won't have any, what would you call it? Pride of ownership. We're beholden to the owner, pride of ownership. If he wants to put profit in front of that, we have no say in it at all. So I'd rather just take the density down to 12 per unit as a maximum for any area in the city. So I just leave it at that.
Okay, and this particular project, like Scarlett said, we're not voting on this project.
I'm
We'll
talking
discuss
about
that another time.
all,
Okay,
all multifamily. Since this is a multifamily and this is the highest density,
It's a mixed use.
It's a mixed use.
it's a mixed use,
right.
but it's got multifamily availability to it. Right, 39 units per acre. Do we have any other zoning that allows 39 units per acre?
We have another development that has been approved and with up to, and it was allowed up to that amount. Well,
But
up
they're
to
not there.
30 because it went horizontal, not vertical.
And this one, actually, that's, we're not reviewing this, but this one qualifies for 30 units because it's not vertical, it's horizontal. So it will be 30 units per acre.
I don't see that as beneficial for Providence, except I can see Ryan's feelings about bringing in more tax dollars, and I don't see that as the highest
Oh, no, I only indicating that there's potential for both sides to consider. I wouldn't necessarily use that as a justification either way. Don't mistake opportunity for recommendation, because there was none in that.
I would suggest in the uses allowed, that we reduce that 75% number. I just like to see the mixed use, at least the mixed use horizontal removed. But we don't have mixed use horizontal. We're just asking for high density housing. That's why the developers are going to. If we didn't have mixed use, they'd be asking for multifamily high density. That's what they want. They want to develop, they want to put in a lot of units as dense as possible to maximize their profit. So be it. Let them go do someplace else. I don't think it's very conducive. And I don't need to convince you guys. That's my opinion. Okay, I'm sorry. That's my opinion.
That's why you're on the board.
Okay, so
And varied opinions are excellent to have on
That's
the
right.
board.
We all learn from them.
There's always been, now, if you're looking at this particular one,
I don't
keep,
know what legislation pushing for. I'm a resident of Providence, and the look and the feel of Providence needs to stay closer to what it has been and not going to these high density 3-story buildings that are just crowding people in and causing them to do things like park on the street all year round. Yeah, where are they going to park in the wintertime? Because we constantly get reminded that we need to be parking off the street when it snows. So anyway, that's,
Okay.
I just rather get rid of mixed use, at least the horizontal design. I'd like to just get rid of it. I'd like to get rid of all of it. And just take it back to regular zoning and get rid of the mixed use idea altogether. So
What was do you remember the density that they're going to put in over there on First South? By the theater,
First South would be up
by the
to,
high school.
12 units per acre is the medium density by the high school? By the,
No, by Logan High School.
oh, I
Campbell
don't
was
know.
talking, the one that
I
has
thought
the
you were
parking
talking-
garage. No.
Oh, I don't know.
40 or 40 something,
Per acre.
40 per acre, I believe.
Yeah.
Or 39. It might have been, it was very close to ours.
Yeah. And that's one that all of Cache Valley has that is that dense, I think. I don't know of any other place that has that density.
For mixed use,
Well, just that they have that high a density
I think some
for
of the,
housing unit.
I think some of the college units would be higher density. I mean, I think once you get up to college, but to Brian's point, we're not the college.
Right.
I mean, when you're getting to the high density that they have, that's different.
Brian, what would you propose? We take 39 out of there. What do you propose?
I propose that we do away with mixed use. I'm very strongly against it. If I was living inside of one of these units, I would have no view, I would have no yard. I don't think I've got any sidewalks. That's not Providence. And I sit in my home, and eat my breakfast, and I see, in 20 minutes, I see 30 people go by walking. I don't see that here. I don't see a view from these places. I don't see trees being planted by these people. I don't see a lot of things that are happening in Providence now, that they're not going to happen here. The look and the feel is not going to happen here. This is it's the rat storage here.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think that, I mean, with mixed use, I think the design is that you would mix enough residential and commercial or office to be able to have it. For instance, we had Visionary come and they presented their work live units. And at that point, I don't know, Brian, I don't know your vote on towards that. But it seemed, I mean, if I were an observer to that meeting, I would have assumed that the planning commission and then approval from the council was very much in favor of a live work unit. And at that point, that's kind of a mixed use. I did go to the chocolate factory, the Aggie chocolate factory. That is kind of a mixed use building, because on the first floor, it does have the chocolate factory. I do think my love for chocolate would probably enjoy a spot like that, but that isn't because it's the tax base or anything else. I do enjoy my share of chocolate. But that one has a restaurant, has the chocolate factory, has the base level, but it does have
It has living
housing-
quarters on top.
living quarters on top. Is it horizontal or vertical? Are those different for you? And I think that would be a good discussion for the group, because there is a difference. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around 30 units on horizontal with, but then when we talked about the parking structure, I thought, oh, well, that's how you consolidate all of the, how the song go, you Dave's Paradise and put up a parking lot. Not Paradise, but Providence is pretty close. But at that point, that's how I thought, oh, well, maybe that's how you accomplish higher density without having the sprawl of parking. And that's the question. So
Very expensive and a beautiful view. First floor, and so you've got this economic difference between the two. I can see vertical, but I can't see horizontal. All I can see horizontal is a big money grab by the developers. And I can't
Well,
see
they can't have this high a density with horizontal. They have to put,
this one,
has to go vertical.
this one, I just did the math. If I did it correctly, the one we're looking at is 11.4 units an acre, which means medium density, not even high density, not even extra bonus density. If this is what you're looking at, we're talking about a medium density replacement. So it's taking medium density and retail and putting them together. It's not even utilizing, if I did it right, and maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree. In this case, I think it's possible.
It's got quite a bit, but you're right. Try to fit 39 units in that, or 30 units in that, and double the number, almost triple the number of units in that space.
I don't see where putting that many units gets us anywhere except problems. 20 years from now. It might look beautiful. What's it called? The blue building, or where the chocolate factory is? That,
Big Blue or something like that.
I don't know the name of the building. I apologize. I do know that the chocolate factory is in there.
So did by the chocolate.
all
yeah.
the chocolate factory.
The Aggie Chocolate Factory.
So
Yeah.
when that first opened up, they had a great Mexican lunch place. And they were shipping burritos out of there as fast as they could. You'd wait in line on it. If you go back now, there's no interest at all there. The stores are all shut down compared to what it used to be. And the university did come in with the chocolate factory, and I think it'll be successful because of the way they're marketing and stuff, which will take years, and lots of investment. That's my opinion on mixed use.
Well, we don't want you to hold back.
I won't, you know I don't. And the reason I voted for these other projects, just so you know, and did not argue with them. It's like
You don't have to justify to the rest of us. That's not the.
But I gotta share it with people. I really like Scarlet. Okay, but the.
You got 2 stars. You only got.
Okay.
Why did you vote for the other unit?
What was the reason to vote for the units? Because the developers came in and they played the rules. And it's like, what am I to say? They played the rules. I'm saying, let's change the rules.
Here are the rules.
Here's the rules, and I don't like them, but I can't tell a developer who comes to the microphone, no, because it's in the rules, and we're playing by the rules. And
Right.
I can agree with that. Okay.
I wonder if the size of this conceptual plan compared to live work is what's turning us off here, just the size of it.
The numbers of units,
Yeah.
as
the acreage.
opposed, and the way it looks, as opposed to,
Yeah.
how many are there? 10 the live work units over here?
The Lakeview,
the live work units do not have the playgrounds.
Mhm.
Their density is as dense as this, but it doesn't have the playgrounds. It doesn't have, it doesn't have all the aesthetic features that an apartment complex has, but I'm gonna be devil's advocate again. The purpose of mixed use isn't to have a really cool apartment complex. The purpose of mixed use is to have a mix of commercial, office, and residential uses.
To what end?
And,
Walkable communities.
and Ryan, I totally get where you're coming from. But I have to say, I have a couple of kids that would line up to buy something in an area like this. They don't want to mow lawns. So I think, and I get what Providence looks like and what it looked like a long time ago. I know what it looked like a long time ago. And it doesn't look anything like original Providence. And so I bet the people that live here now, they wanted that change. Those people that moved in and had us make those changes, they wanted that style of living. They didn't want to have backyard cows anymore.
So who
And-
wanted the high density space, the high density zoning?
There actually are people that live in our community that really enjoy living in their townhomes, and they are professional people that could choose to live anywhere they wanted, and they're choosing to live in some really nice townhomes. There are people that
Because they can
have
come and go
that.
as they please and they don't have to buy a lawnmower.
But I don't want to debate your opinion back and forth. I'm just saying that there are some people that really do want to live in multifamily communities. I am not necessarily one of those.
Yeah.
But like I said,
And everybody sitting here are not one of
Okay,
those.
so I rest my case. Why are we allowing them?
There were people that did want. I mean, even you can look at the interest that was around a few months back of townhomes up on the hill, $1 billion townhomes up on the hill. Because they didn't want all of the other aspects of a
Of a big
residence,
lot,
big lot. And I would turn to Rowan, and it's because he was involved in some of those code change, right? That brought that
Well, he was involved with putting together mixed use.
mixed use. So, because I agree, I came in after all of that, but there's got to be a reason why it got in there.
One item to consider is, it's the reason I wasn't able to move into Providence when I came here, is because the housing and the availability to live in Providence, there is not. I mean, you look at the prices of housing that has happened in the last 5 years, 10 years, the change of that, the availability of housing in Cache Valley and in Providence. You look at the number of houses that are for sale in
65.
Providence, in Cache Valley,
65 in
in
Cache
all
Valley.
of Cache
All of
Valley.
Cache Valley.
And our unemployment rate is less than 3%. There is a demand for any type of housing that is available. I'm not to say that in 10 years something may be different.
It will be worse.
It-
Because there'll be more people.
there will be more people, and where do you put them? And
Peterborough, Mendon, no.
I'm not saying it has to be here.
No, it's not down to the agricultural lands.
And that's a different take on it. And it's just we have that demand coming in. We don't have, I mean, we have a lot of townhouses that have come in the last few years, and they're all oversold. I mean, they're sold. There's not an empty
And there's a
one.
wait.
And at those points, those ones,
And why? Because it's this thing available for
It's
them.
not cheap.
but we're still talking $250,000. There's still,
That's the minimum price of a
it-
property. in this valley.
yeah, it still costs more. It still costs more to buy a townhouse in this valley than it did to sell my 3,600 square foot house on more than a quarter acre where I left. I left a 36 6-bedroom, 4-bath house where I left, and I couldn't sell it for the cost of a townhouse in this town.
When I finished college, I didn't want to live here. I couldn't live here. I couldn't raise a family here. It was not a good place to live. So I left and I looked around and I came back after 15, 20 years. And it's worked out just fine for me.
I came back after that, after 20 years. I was to college here and graduated with both a bachelor's and master's degree from here and lived in a trailer while I was here. I understand that. But
I don't think we need to cater to the lowest price, real estate in the valley, or because it'll just bring us trouble. I mean, the west side of Logan is a perfect example, at least the west side along the Logan River here. It's terrible over there. I would never go over there.
You know what Champlin per lot, how much does it cost? $84,000 a lot. My lot is 93,000.
and how big is it?
I can't put a 2,200 square foot house on.
Because
cannot?
it is,
I cannot.
It's 6,000. Are you talking about the Champlin property?
Try.
6,000 square feet probably.
or,
Somewhere is what the lot is.
or maybe a little less because they
They're
got the
talking
bump,
about-
the
Yeah, that's
density.
right.
So we're talking between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet.
They're talking about the houses on the normal lot of 50 by 52, is about the size of the house.
And I totally appreciate where this discussion is going, but this discussion is more multifamily, and I think that we have to come to a point to agree to disagree. There definitely are people that want to live in a different lifestyle than I want to live in. And they are not people that would bring more crime or anything else like that. They are people that would be good, upstanding citizens in all walks of life
But they don't want to plant a tree.
that don't want to plant a
Okay.
tree and don't want to mow lawn. And that is a reality. There are many people that still want the big lots, but there are many people that want to do other things. There are people that want to drive electric cars. There are people that want to pedal bike more than I've ever seen before. People that want to be able to walk to the grocery store instead of having to get in their car and go.
And you know what?
That's a culture change that we're experiencing.
I enjoy diversity.
So
And so this gives us a chance to have diverse neighbors too.
But where I'm coming back to with this actually is kind of, like I said, it's a devil's advocate. I actually think in the mixed use area, more office and boutique or whatever eateries would make better sense for the overall community and the overall zone than those pickleball courts. Because those pickleball,
courts are right next to the stadium anyway.
yes.
So they could be, you could do some subdivisions there if you wanted and somebody could pull in and make that whole piece commercial.
That whole piece was
Yes.
commercial.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then it got rezoned to mixed. And now it's park, which is great. But my devil's advocate is saying, is that really the intent of mixed use? To have really cool multifamily amenities? Because what we sacrifice to get that is the offices and the eateries and that type of thing.
So where do we send all those kids to play? All
So
those
under-
units in this example, where do we send all those kids to?
I think there's a different type of demographic that wants to live in a mixed use development than there is that live in the same place we send the Providence North. I mean, you all really like that Providence North. You liked it because it met the ordinance, not because you like multifamily. But you like Providence North. There's no place for those kids to play. They don't have all these cool things.
You're talking about right away, all the apartment townhouses.
Mhm.
They're next to the park.
They're next to the park and the school and the
Yeah.
playground and
Yeah.
basketball courts. I mean, it's all right next to them. These kids are gonna go out on a busy street and cross one of the busiest streets if we take all of that away from them. But I understand what you're saying too, that land could generate more income from the city for revenue for the city, also for the landowners. But again, it's like, where do people go and play? I mean, where do families? That's what makes a difference, I think, of the community is the families and the places for them. And there is retail close by. They could walk. They could walk over to the movies. They could walk to some restaurants. They can walk to the grocery store, and they have a place to play and be. I would see the apartments as a place for young families starting, maybe seniors downsizing, a mixed use of people in there,
But right now, the issue is not this development,
right.
but
Something
mixed,
similar. to
mixed
it.
use is, I think when this was developed, it was like, how can we get some kind of a symbiotic relationship going between the people that live there, the people that shop there, the people that can walk other places. And so we need to stick with this. This is the instruction that we gave to these people. They followed the instruction. So that's not debatable. What's debatable is from this time going forward, as we put this plan into place.
You go back to, Bob and I sat to the planning commission for the general plan. And this was discussed in great depth in developing general plan. And the deal was is that we would intend that we'd have more retail than we're looking at this thing here, and more shops included in the mixed use was the idea. So we could see an advantage for people who wanted to start little businesses where they could have places to start them.
So what you're saying is rather than having it weighted more toward the housing, but not having it weighted toward the housing and having it weighted toward more business.
Yes.
So instead of 75-25, maybe it needs to be 50-50.
Something like that. That's what the thought was. Isn't that what we were talking about, Bob, years when we were looking at the general plan?
At that point, I know we kicked it around back and forth.
Or did we ever?
Yeah. I was new and it was a steep learning curve for me at that point. But I don't remember exactly what the percentages were. But it's, I don't think we were talking about this.
No.
Weren't there 20 retail, 20 commercial, and
No, it ended up that no one use could be less than 20%. So whatever you picked, it had to be at least 20%. So, but that was,
but they could choose two
Mhm.
of those that were in there.
Yep. And
So residential and commercial, or residential and retail.
And what we saw when they started coming in was that they were asking for multifamily. They were being denied multifamily. So they were going with the maximum amount of residential and the minimum amount of retail commercial. And I don't think that was ever the intent of the mixed use. I don't
So
think,
because it wasn't that well defined in here,
right,
this is what you come up with.
right, that's right. And so that's why we're looking at it again. And so my personal thought is that we do consider higher densities in the mixed use, but we reduce that residential component, the percentage of residential down a bit.
Right.
And yes, they'll still have to put some green space and make those units attractive to people to want to buy them. But I don't know that creating a really cool apartment complex was what we had in mind for a mixed-use district.
Much of the mixed-use discussion was about where you had the shop on the ground and the people live above the shop.
Back to Brian's comment on the vertical.
That was what was talked about at great length about mixed use.
So you'd have a lot more retail doing that.
Yes.
And that's the thing that's missing. If they're really doing, we have to put this retail because you require us. What we want is the maximum. housing.
But they didn't do maximum.
Yeah.
It's
but
really
right,
medium.
Right, it's medium.
Yeah.
But I think that's the real thing. Something like this, more retail, but maintaining, I guess to me, it's what makes Providence so unique is the quality of lifestyle. That's why I like the open space and I like the things offered. And certainly it has to have the ability to be changed if some new game comes out, and everybody loves shuffleboard now. So, but
It's making a comeback.
yeah, I'm hoping all my cruise ship friends. But I think the seniors, I can dominate. So I think I think I understand what everybody's saying. I agree. I don't like the 39 unit thing, all of that, but I think a lot of these, it's the medium. I like that. We need more retail mix in it. That's going to make it more walkable and everything else. And I think maintain the quality of lifestyle that Providence enjoys. And that's having I think adding a bunch more retail and getting rid of the open space and adding retail only benefits the owners. It doesn't benefit the tenants. But if you added more retail throughout this and you kept that, then it's a win for everybody. We get more retail, people get a better quality of living, but
Going back to this sentence we're talking about, of uses included in the development, no one no one use can be less than 50%.
Can be
Oh.
more. Well,
Yeah.
50%, it doesn't matter.
No one
Whether you
use
say
can
less
be
or
less
more.
than 50% of the entire development.
Now on that one, just as a question, if there are 3 types of uses, then that limits you only to choosing 2, right? So if you had 30%, if you bumped it from 20 to 30%, then you could get closer. But if you want the ability for the 3 uses, you may want to consider there are 3 opportunity uses.
Or you can say, no one use could be more than 50%. That way no one use could be more than 50%, but you could have another 25% and 25%, or 30% retail and 20% professional businesses, and still have your 50% if you say no one use can be more. But if you say no use can be less than 50, then you've gone to what Ryan's saying and saying it's got to be only 2 uses, 50-50.
Is it the rental component that it's hard for you to, if these were units that people could, if they're townhomes that people could purchase, does that feel better? Well, there's no one behind
You
you.
were looking through his glasses. And I
You were
wasn't
looking-
sure, Roland,
You were looking through his glass.
Okay, so,
Mr.
I
Marvel.
just think that the people's homes, in this city, we didn't have any apartments in the city 10 years ago, did we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a few here and there? Yeah, maybe.
There's the duplex across
Eastside
from
Townhouse
both
has been
houses.
here for 20 years.
What has,
These townhomes right around the
Right
White
over
House,
here, yeah.
right over here.
The townhomes are against Alma Leon Park.
Mhm.
So there was some, but I think it's getting out of hand. I don't know nobody I've spoken to likes these 3-story units over on First South.
have you talked to the people who live there?
No, I don't, because I think,
People that live there like them.
yeah, Good.
So there's such a big disparity.
Well, but it's the people of Providence that we need to be worried about. And so those
are in
people,
Providence.
they are now, but what if we don't put any more of those in? Then we'll get people more of like mind that are bad, more of like mind to the people that are already here.
But who can afford a lot today?
It's not that. Go someplace else and buy it. If you can't afford it here, go someplace else. If you can't afford it here, go someplace else.
I'm not sure I'm ready to make those kind of decisions, but that's okay. We need everybody's opinion. I like being able to limit it down because if you go 50%, then it just, by the very nature of the 50%, it reduces the density.
Increases the commercial.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily reduce the density, but it reduces the number of units that you can put there. It would still be 39 units per acre, but it would reduce the number of units.
But it would be one building instead of two.
You'd have to be more creative in the way you did your residential component if you did that.
But we could see some that bring all three into the same development, a true mixed use development, residential, retail, and commercial, professional offices and things, which we would like to see more of. Because those resources, those services, people are leaving Providence to go get. And there's a lot of them. I was really shocked to see that list of all that money going out of
The leakage.
out of Providence, which in every one of those things, every one of those could be something that's a viable opportunity in a business here in Providence, just like it is somewhere else. So I think we
Well, just because it's here doesn't mean they're going to go here to shop. If it's a Chevy dealership and they only buy Fords, you know, they're
Yeah.
still gonna leak out.
but if
at
it's
least it's
here,
here.
if it's here, the odds are, like they say, if you build it, they will come.
You might also have those that buy a Chevy, for your example, that don't live here but come
But
here.
come here to buy.
And so your leakage
and
is
leave their
both
tax dollars.
sides. So
Okay, well, I thought we could maybe put this to bed tonight. Looks like it's not gonna be put to bed. I would say let's put it on the agenda for the next time and
So the important things sound to me like that we need to focus on density. Oops, sorry. We need to focus on our density level a little bit. We need to make sure that we have some type of open space for the residential component. Maybe not to the extent that this is, but some good compatible open space for the residential component. And we need to make it so that it encourages more of the commercial, in commercial, I'm including retail and professional and all of those
all
type
those
of
things that are on
uses.
the list.
All those things on the list.
Right.
Those are the three objectives to try and, is that,
And I think we need to add in the things you brought up that didn't make it in yet, and that was the
the electric,
electric thing, the bicycle things, and then I'd like to think and study a little more. Is there anything else? Is there anything else that is coming about that we should be preparing for?
They have electric scooters in Salt Lake.
Yeah. Yes.
maybe we do look at something more like 25 units or somewhere in that neighborhood than 30, because that's still an up from multifamily high, which is 18 units per acre. So that still gives them some incentive to put a residential component near commercial areas. And I think that's one thing that you have to think about. A lot of single family homes don't want to be right in Macy's backyard. That's not where they want to live.
Zone right now, it won't happen that way. No, it won't be. I don't consider what's over there in their backyard, but it's limited. We've got commercial building or residential.
Right, but if you do away with the multifamily and you need to keep a certain element of commercial, because that's viable for a city, is to have a certain element of commercial. If you need to keep that and you do away with the multifamily or you do away with the mixed use, what you're saying is what we're going to encourage are single family homes right next to commercial complexes, big commercial complexes. And what I'm saying is, I don't know that they would be as desirable. And then you may actually not get the kind of, you may end up with some of the nuisances, because even though they're single family homes, they're not desirable to live in a great big single family home right next to Macy's semis coming around the corner.
Well, and people that live in single family homes have an expectation of perhaps a view or the freedom to not have somebody right next to them. But people who are buying condominiums and buying townhomes, that expectation and apartments or living in apartments, there is not an expectation on their part to get a view. They don't even come in with that expectation. Yeah. And it's a single family home.
Right.
Right.
Double homes like they've got here on Second North,
Second East.
Second North, Providence Lane, First North. Over Providence Lane, there's quite a few double homes in there. Those would be appropriate.
Okay.
One other thing I'd like to note, and I don't know if we could put it in the mixed use or not, but there is a challenge. This piece of property is going to be owned by a corporation, right? If it was to go through something like that with apartments and commercial would be owned by
Someone
a corporation.
that would own the whole thing.
Right. Is that correct? That's a good assumption. And that corporation, the reason that corporation's in business is to make money. And so the whole idea of apartments doesn't really bode well with, in my mind, Providence. What does bode well is having people own those individually. Now you're talking about private ownership. You're talking about HOAs where they get together and manage things together. And that private ownership just goes a long, long ways. They can decide whether it's pickleball, tennis, or, shuffleboard, Michael.
Thank you.
These are all townhomes.
They're
But there's
townhomes, but they're apartments.
Apartments, townhome style
Yeah.
apartments. But I'll let it.
I think both can be pluses and minuses. Having a single owner that maintains it all, but I think a good HOA makes a big difference. But I have also seen apartments that become the slum, like you said, because they were the cheap place in town. They got bought by those that didn't have any desire to live there, and they became rentals, and every other one's rented by somebody different, and you have no continuity. I mean, you have both sides. You would hopefully you'd have and I said, good HOA makes a huge difference. I agree with you.
Good HOAs are put in by
Developers.
Okay, lots of things to think about. That's the end of our agenda. The next meeting would be on the 28th.
If there's anything that comes in, otherwise it would be on the 12th.
We have a couple of things that are close. So I wouldn't necessarily write it off, but they do have some work cut out for them. So I can't say for sure that we're going to have something ready for the 28th. I wouldn't take it off your calendar just yet, but I kind of leaning that we probably won't.
So pencil it in for the 28th. What?
Oh, the May.
May. It's gonna say, wait a minute. We lost a whole month. Stop it. Time goes fast enough as it is. We don't need. Okay, so okay, Rowan Cecil is moving to close the meeting. Ryan Marbles, second. All in favor?
I
Aye. Thank you all.